Hello and thanks for watching. In today's video I'm going to be demonstrating how to install and use the Greybel-VS plugin for Visual Studio Code and how to set up the message hook method of compiling source code in-game and importing code in-game. So let's get started. First thing we need to do, let's take a look at the Greybel-VS GitHub. The README has all the instructions for how to use it, including how to set up the message hook system or plugin, I guess. So this is the GitHub. I'll put a link to this in the description of the video. But if we scroll down here to this README file, there's a lot of really good information here. I'm going to kind of use it as the, for like a table of contents here. I can go directly to build, which has the information for how to set up the message hook system. Now there's, it talks about a few different versions here, BepInEx 5.x.x or 6. I don't really know that there's much difference between the two. I haven't had any issue using BepInEx 6. So I'm going to go ahead and use BepInEx 6. If you're not familiar, BepInEx is a way of basically sideloading mods into any Unity game. And if you were unfamiliar, Greyhack is a game that was developed with Unity. So we can use BepInEx to kind of sideload some mods. I won't really talk too much about modding, but I will say that the message hook plugin, which facilitates the whole importing code into the game and automatically compiling it, that functionality is built as a plugin for BepInEx. So if you're going to be doing if you want to automatically be able to import code into the game and compile it, you must install the BepInEx, I don't know what you would call this, I guess a plugin or whatever, for Greyhack, and then get the message hook plugin that Ayecue has, or Ayecue, I guess is how you would probably say it, has linked here in the description. So I'm going to start by downloading it. It can be a little bit confusing, to know like what to do. There's a whole lot of extra information when you go to the BepInEx releases page in the BepInEx site. I will say it's probably best to just ignore most of it. Most of it's not applicable and is just kind of like extra things that you can do or may want to know if you have special cases. But for us, it's very simple. So the only thing we have to do is just pay attention to which version it says to install here. You'll notice it says 6.0.0-pre2. So this is like a pre-release version, I think. But particularly we want to pay attention to this Unity Mono. That's going to be the one that we want. So I'm going to click the link. It takes us to another GitHub, which is this BepInEx GitHub. It takes us directly to a particular release, which is the version 6 pre-2. If we scroll down, we see all these download files here. This is what I mean when I say it can be kind of overwhelming. If you're looking at these and you're like, oh my god, there's like 10 files or 12 files or I guess 15 files. How do I know which one to download? You may start, reading up here. It may lead you to this link, and you may be kind of reading this, going, "Oh man, is this something I need to pay attention to?" It's not, so don't worry about any of that. If you're back on the page here for Greybel, it may have there's a link to this installation guide. Again, it's really, you don't have to pay attention to most of this. I mean, this stuff is all accurate, but it's honestly, it's too much. It's more than you need to know. So don't worry about it, because you can get into a lot of like, oh, is this the right path? Is this the right path? Do I need to go to Bleeding Edge? Do I need to do, it doesn't matter. It's overwhelming. Don't worry about it. All we need to pay attention to is, of these files, we want the Unity Mono, which is what these bottom 6 or so are, or 5, I guess, here. We want to pick the one that is appropriate for our operating system. So I'm running a 64-bit build of Windows, so I would want this Unity Mono Win x64. So I'm going to click on that and download it. Obviously, if you're running Linux or Mac OS, you would want the appropriate one for those. I have done this in Mac OS. This process is almost exactly the same. There's one extra step for Mac OS, which I'll talk about in a minute. But otherwise, Mac OS and Linux, by the way, which I'll talk about in a minute. But otherwise, the process is pretty much exactly the same. So I'm going to save this to my desktop. And then I'm going to go ahead and just open that up and extract it. We get this zip file. We need all of the contents of the zip file. So I'm going to extract it. You can extract it directly into the target location if you want to. I'm just going to extract it into a folder so we can look at it briefly. You'll see these 5 files that get extracted from that archive. Like I said, we do need all of these. So where we need to put them is we're going to put them directly in the game directory. Wherever you have your Steam games located. For me, I have them installed on a secondary drive. I have a library here called, I've just called it Steam Library. And then you would go to Steam Apps and then Common. If you're familiar with Steam games, you're familiar with this folder structure. This is where all of the games that are installed to this library are located. We see we have the Greyhack folder here. We're going to take all 5 of these files and copy them directly to this Greyhack folder. It shouldn't overwrite anything. It's all, they're all new files. You can see we've now got all these extra files in here. So we do need one additional file, which is the plugin file. But if you notice inside of this BepInEx folder, we don't have all the folders here that we need. We do actually have the plugins folder, but we don't have all the files and stuff that we need. So what I do, and I'm not 100% sure that you have to do this, but what I usually do is I run the game once, because BepInEx will create, the extra folder structure and files and stuff that are supposed to be there. I don't know if you must do that before putting the plugin in, but like I said, I like to. So let's run the game real quick. This is, by the way, the public build of Greyhack. If you're running the nightly build, there's actually a special version of both the plugin and the Visual Studio Code extension. So if you're running the nightly build and you want to do this, I recommend that you head over to the Greybel Discord. There's a channel in the Greybel Discord where Ayecue is posting updates about the nightly build and previously the experimental build. And those will have links to the modified versions that are appropriate for the nightly build. But for me, I'm on the public multiplayer. Which, this doesn't matter, multiplayer, single player, it's the same. But that's just what I'm on. So, okay, so I've run the game, I'm in my computer, that's all I need to do. I'm going to exit out of it. If I go and look in here now, there's extra stuff in here. You can see it added a few folders, a log output. So that's fine. So now I'm going to go ahead and download the actual message hook plugin from the Ayecue's Greybel README file. So pay attention. We got the version 6, so we want the plugin here, the Greyhack message hook DLL underneath version 6. I assume they are different because they're linked differently and this one's named differently. So just pay attention to which one you download. So I'm going to get this plugin DLL. We'll go over here and just navigate to, again, where I have the game installed. Steam Library, Steam Apps, Common, Greyhack, and BepInEx, and then plugins. And I'm going to save it in there. If you do have, other things that you're running, other mods, I know Matcha puts out a bunch of mods. They would go in that same folder as well. But I just have the message hook plugin for the purposes of this video, so I've saved that there. I'm going to go ahead and run the game again, just because in order, obviously to use the message hook method of importing importing code and compiling it in the game actually has to be running. So I'm going to just pop it up real quick. Just so I can have that already running when the time comes to test it out. So to test this, by the way, I'm using Pluto's shell program. It's got support for Greybel-VS already built in. You just clone the repository, and you can just immediately build it in the game. You don't have to modify it at all for Greybel. Okay, so we're in game. Let me just real quick. I want to be sure that it works, so I'm going to pop up my own tool here and just take a look at the bin directory, because I think I need to, yeah, I already have shell in there, so I'm going to real quick just delete it. And then, okay, it's all gone. All right, so I have a clean directory here that I can build into. So basically, this is just a sanity check. When I configure the settings and stuff the way I like to do it, after the import, the only file that gets added is the actual compiled binary. So none of the extra source code files or anything get put in there. So, obviously, in order to make sure that the file that's in the bin directory is actually new, I just delete the old one first. So currently there is no shell file in my bin directory. After the import and compile, there will be, and that's how I know it's a new one, and I'm not just seeing the same one that was already there. So, okay, so that's it for the in-game. Let's pop over to Visual Studio Code. This video assumes you have some level of familiarity with VS Code. It's a free IDE. You can download it online. Put out there by Microsoft. Very powerful IDE. And so if you're watching this, I assume you know that Greybel is actually an extension for VS Code. So I'm starting fresh from nothing. So, I'm going to go ahead and install the extension here. And you can just, it's in the marketplace. You don't have to do anything special. You can just install. So we can see it now in my list of installed extensions. Now, you can use it right out of the box. I don't know how well the message hook integration will work immediately. The default settings I don't think actually import into the game. So we're going to come over here and take a look at the settings. If I find, oh, there we go, settings. Okay. Now you'll notice up here we have user settings and workspace settings. User settings, if you change the user settings, those settings are applied to everything all the time. If you change the workplace or workspace settings, rather, what happens is there's a VS Code file, like a JSON file called settings.json inside of this VS Code directory. Sorry, my dog is playing with a toy. I don't know if you can hear the squeaking. If you can, I apologize. But anyway, if you make changes to this workspace settings, it actually saves the settings inside of this settings.json file. So any settings that you change in this workspace settings are actually only applied to the currently loaded workspace. So I find that to be really useful with Greybel for things like environment settings. So if I want to store like IP addresses or credentials or email addresses or email credentials or whatever, I put them in an environment variable in the workspace settings, and that saves them for that particular set of code. Which is useful because I have, obviously, my hex program requires variables in a certain format. I have some variables saved for shell that are saved in a certain format, and they're different. So this allows me to have settings that are specific to each set of code. But for most of these settings, I do them in the user settings because I want them applied to everything globally. So I'm not going to go through everything. I will go through the really useful things. These are the default settings. In VS Code, you can tell if a setting's been changed because it'll have like a little bar next to it, and I'll show you that in a moment. But the important things are, most of this doesn't matter. We want, let's see. If you're going to do environment variables, by the way, there's interpreter and there's transpiler. So I usually save it to both, but I think transpiler is the more important one, but I can never remember which is which, so I just put it in both. But for the purposes of this video, I'm not going to go into that. It's pretty easy to modify those if we wanted to. It just says edit in, settings dot whatever. And we can see there's some other settings here, user settings from different extensions, stuff like that. So I'm going to close that because I don't want to actually make any changes. We'll reset that. Okay, most of the default settings you don't have to change. Let's see, all of this is fine. All this is fine. I can go over in more detail what each of these settings does, but for most folks, the default settings will be fine, so I'm not going to really go into too much detail here. Here's the transpiler environment variables, by the way, so keep those in mind. Okay, so one thing I do like to change is by default, it's going to compile that binary, whatever source code you're compiling, it's going to put it in the root directory. I prefer to have it go directly into bin, so I usually change that. This is what I was talking about, that little bar, by the way, that indicates the setting's been changed. These are all fine. I like to turn off this installer because I have my code automatically compile in-game, so I don't need an installer. If you leave this on, Greybel will actually generate a source code file that automatically imports and does all of the transpiler stuff for you, and you can just copy and paste it in game. But since I have I like to have it set to automatically compile it, so I turn this off because I don't also need the installer. But if you didn't want to do that and you just wanted it to spit out something that simplified all your code so you could manually copy and paste it, you would probably want this installer. These next two options also apply to the installer. If you want the installer to compile your code in a way that allows it to be importable, you would turn this on. And the second one is if you want the installer to automatically compile your code, you would turn this on. If you leave this off, all that happens is it recreates your source code files in the game. It doesn't actually compile them. But if you turn this on, when you run the installer, it recreates all your source code files and then it builds them, and then I think it actually cleans them up too afterwards. I'm not totally sure. Like I said, I don't use the installer. I just have it automatically do it. So I do turn that off though because I don't want the installer generated. Just extra messy files, I guess. I don't know. Doesn't hurt anything to leave that the default. Okay, I leave all of this the same except for this one. This is the key one. So the create in-game active, I turn that on. I do want it to automatically create my files in-game when it builds. I leave the allow import off because I'm compiling the root file. I don't need it to be importable. And I do want it to automatically compile the files. So this option will have them copy the source code files in game. This option will then cause it to build those source code files and clean up after itself. There's one other thing that I usually change, and I must have skipped it. Let's see. I think it's this excluded namespaces. Oh, here we go. So the type analyzer strategy. The way I typically have my source code files arranged is I just include everything in like a root file or a barrel file rather than importing namespaces. And so what this setting does, this type analyzer strategy, is it tells Greybel where to look for references to your code. So like if you're familiar with Greybel, you can kind of hover over your function names and stuff and it'll find them. And you can like control click them to go to them and all that kind of stuff. This is the strategy that Greybel uses to find your code, those references. And so what I like to do is I change it to workspace because I want it to just analyze all of the files, like everything in the workspace here, not just the ones that are directly linked to in the file that's active. So I change it to workspace. However, when you build a file in Greybel, it creates this build directory and it actually puts copies of all the code in there. That's code that's minimized or minified rather, transpiled, etc. according to your settings. And so what I do is I like to in the settings I like to exclude that build directory because I don't want it to find the version that's in here as like the references for my functions. So when I control click, if there's a function that's like in core.5pk.source, I don't want it to look at this file and take me here. I want it to take me to this version, which is the unminified, untranspiled version. So in the settings, I like to just exclude that and then change this to workspace. So you may not have to do that. It's not necessary, but it makes my life easier. So, sorry, 1 second, my voice is a little rough. I am drinking, so that hopefully it doesn't sound terrible for the rest of the video. Okay, but I think that's all the file, or all the settings we need to change. So I'll come back over here to the main source code file, and let's try building it. It should work because I've got the game running, the plugins up and running. So let's build it and see what happens. So in order to build it, you go to the file that you want to build, you right click, and then you can build file from context. There are some settings where you can override that and say like always build a particular file no matter what file you click on and click build. That's a new setting actually. That wasn't in there until recently. But I just ignored that setting. I'm used to just going to the file I actually want to build. And you'll notice we had some notifications down here. It said 5 files got imported, build done, available here. I don't know what happens if you click that. I think it takes you to here. But the important thing is, in the game, if I now take a look at that bin directory, we should have a file called, and we do, a new file called shell. You can see it's got the default permissions because it's new. And I'll test it right now. Let's see. To make sure it built correctly, and look at that, that worked. So there we go. We've got shell up and running, compiled from Greybel-VS, and automatically imported into the game and compiled in the game. I'm going to do it one more time, and we're going to actually just look at it from the game side of things, so you can kind of see what's happening in the game when you do this. So let me close this, and then we'll run it. You'll notice it opens a terminal in the game, and then it writes a whole bunch of files, and then it did some other stuff that happened too fast. It compiled it, deleted, cleaned up the source code files, and then what we're left with is this file here. Now, if we, real quick, let me just take a look at, oh, my system's locked down. Can't do anything if you're not root. I think that's right. So if we look at the size of this, this shell file, which is down here at the bottom, you'll notice that it's exactly 110,000 bytes. That's the smallest possible file size. Oh, it looks like there was an error. It didn't clean up after itself. We still have some other files in here that we should not have. Or maybe that's just leftover. I think that's something else. I thought that was... Yeah, never mind. It did clean up after itself. But anyway, so we're left with just the smallest file size. So what Greybel actually does behind the scenes is it actually creates a folder with a random name in here. And when it initially compiles the source code, it compiles it with the name DDDD, which in Greyhack, if you create a file, compile a file with that name, it will be created as the smallest possible file size in game. And then Greybel renames that file to the correct name, copies it to the actual directory, and then deletes the folder that it created. Basically, it's just a bunch of kind of behind the scenes stuff to make sure that when it gets compiled as the smallest possible file size, which is pretty neat. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of it. Gonna wrap up the video. That's how to go from nothing to having Greybel-VS installed. And the source code, by the way, this shell source code, it's available from Pluto's GitHub server, or GitHub not server, I guess, but GitHub page or something. I don't know what you call it. And you can clone that code and compile it freely. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope to see you next time. Bye.